In our study of the chapter titled Oneness, Sri Aurobindo has brought us to the very crux of the yoga itself when he says, the complete realization of unity is therefore the essence of the integral knowledge and of the integral yoga. The active word here is complete realization of unity. What does it mean for it to be complete? And this is what he has already shown us broadly by describing all the extremes of the states of consciousness in which we must find the same Satchidananda, the same unity. But in the next paragraph, which we will be taking up now, he brings it all together in a single experience, which is one of the most extraordinary passages in the entire book. Further, in the same portion that we read last time, he says that this Satchidananda, knowing his oneness in himself and in all manifestations, that movement goes through 3 stages or 3 degrees in which the vision of oneness becomes active in all the statuses of our work in life, and eventually we live, think, feel, will and act in the sense of the unity. And at that point, he says, this realization of oneness and this practice of oneness in difference is the whole of the yoga. Now this is, as we have seen, an extraordinary statement. All of the yoga is nothing but the realization of oneness and the practice, its application in the difference. The difference which is an apparent difference of the oneness. So oneness which knows its oneness and oneness which plays in difference. These are the 2 spaces in which we have to be living in and living by the oneness, and that is the whole of the yoga. In the paragraph we take up now, he brings all this together in the experience of the oneness. What is this experience of oneness in its completeness? What is it like? What does it cover? What are all the aspects of its completeness? And the way he describes it, remember, Sri Aurobindo is a poet. Poetry, or being a poet, is not just a question of writing with rhythm and rhyme, which I think most of us can do with a little bit of effort. But the true poet and the true nature of the poetry, Sri Aurobindo explains, is the singing of the soul. And when the soul sings, there is this spontaneous rhythm, spontaneous rhyme or resonance of its movements of the song. And that, when it takes form of words, becomes the true poetry. And to the extent that poetry approaches this, it becomes real poetry. Otherwise it's only a skillful construction, which, by the way, the modern artificial intelligence can recreate better than most human beings. Artificial intelligence, AI, can write poetry pretty much on any subject, and with all the nice rhymes and rhythms, because it can actually go through all possibilities of combinations of words, make them fit into grammar and even meaning, and come up with even insightful poetry. But that's not it. So Sri Aurobindo, being a poet, the experience he is describing is an experience of the oneness, of the soul, of the self, of the divine, of the Satchidananda. And if he has to describe that, the only way he can describe it is for that oneness to sing itself out. to take form in words. And that is poetry. So the paragraph we will read now, although written as prose, because it is part of a book, as we read, you will find in it some extraordinary a poetic dimension. It is poetry, literally, even as it articulates an experience. And we will see in it an extraordinary rhythm and a structure in its unfolding. He begins with the oneness, describes some of its primary aspects of the oneness of Satchidananda, and then moves from there to their unfoldment through the 7 levels of consciousness, the 7 principles of the Satchidananda as it moves into manifestation. And that is the whole of the paragraph. He begins like this: Satchidananda is one in himself, in whatever status or whatever plane of existence. So there are 2 poises, the 2 things, the status of Satchidananda and then the planes in which Satchidananda expresses. And if you look at the rest of the paragraph, it's describing this and then the planes. What does it mean, the status of Satchidananda? We will see that in the very next sentence. We have therefore to make that, the Satchidananda's oneness in himself, we have therefore to make that the basis of all effectuation, whether of consciousness or force or being, whether of knowledge or will or delight. Whatever all these may be, consciousness, force, being, knowledge, will, delight, each of these is a status of the Satchidananda. We have to make that the basis of all effectuations of these 6 statuses. Oneness should be the basis for the effectuation of all these things. Now what does that mean? What is effectuation of consciousness, effectuation of force, effectuation of being, effectuation of knowledge, will or delight? And so we dwell a little bit on this. And how is oneness the basis for the effectuation? And we can start with some analogies of our human experience. Consciousness. What does it mean for us? I am aware, I am conscious. And then in your consciousness you are aware that perhaps you are happy, or you are despondent, or you are aware of some possibility which draws you. And this awareness is the consciousness, and its effectuation is when this moves into intensity, action. So I'm happy. My happiness moves to expressing itself. I am despondent. My despondency now takes on form or moves to express. So, in the first step, what he's saying, we have to make the oneness the basis for all effectuation of consciousness. I am aware. My awareness is based in the oneness of Satchidananda, and all expression of my consciousness, my awareness moving to express, must be based on this oneness. In all its expression, in all its action, in all its relations, it must be feeling, seeing, and experiencing the oneness. And only on that basis it is effectuating itself. Second, the same thing at the level of force. The basis of effectuation of all force must be the oneness. And what does that mean? So again we look at an analogy within ourselves. What is force? I am aware, let's say, and now my awareness wants to exercise itself. Let's say I am despondent, I want to become happy, and I apply a force which changes my consciousness. So there is awareness, and there are many awarenesses, perhaps many facets of awareness. Force is when there is a shift from one awareness to another. That's how we experience within ourselves something pushing to make a change. Now that force which is already in you, if you have awareness, you have force, because you can change awareness. You can say in your awareness, I'm aware of myself as silent. I can also become aware of myself as active, and I shift, and that force brings me to this aspect of activity. But then I want to express that activity, and the force moves outward to effectuation. So effectuation of force is this movement of the force which was otherwise purely internal, now moving to express outward. And the basis for that again will be oneness, meaning I experience all force of all my awareness as one indivisible force. As it moves, it is still relating to everything as the same one force in all things. There is no force against force. There is only one force playing through all forms. One force expressing this way or that. Third, all effectuation of being. So let's take an analogy again. In your awareness, you say, I am. There's no awareness, there is no force, no action. What is the basic truth of you? I am, I exist. And yes, you are aware that you exist, but the existence is already there. And this is the most deep foundation of everything, of the Satchidananda itself. It is the Sat of the Satchidananda. The existence becomes aware that it is existing, and the awareness of its existence is blissful. The being also has an effectuation, and this is a very interesting thing. The whole universe also exists. Is that existence different from the oneness of the existence? It's the same existence. But here is existence which focuses on its oneness without difference, and here is existence effectuating all its possibilities, playing out difference, but the same existence, moving from this to that. And unity, oneness, is still the basis. As the whole universe becomes, unfolds, draws out from this seed, so to say, it is always in the oneness that everything moves. So let's reread the sentence. You will see how profound it is. We have therefore to make that oneness of Satchidananda the basis of all effectuation, whether of consciousness or force or being. So it is at a very essential level that he is describing everything. And then comes something more. A second phrase, whether of knowledge or will or delight. Now he just spoke of consciousness, force, being, and now he speaks of knowledge, will, delight. And you'll see these are at a level where the sense of separation is more obvious. When you are conscious, let's say you are conscious of yourself, what is knowledge in that awareness? I am aware I exist, and what does knowledge mean? A drawing out of specific things. I am aware that I am happy, or I can be happy, or I am despondent, or I can be despondent. And you see, the sense of knowledge is nothing but the awareness entering into play, playing out some possibilities of the awareness. And that is what we call knowledge. It is awareness moving into expressing various possibilities. Similarly, he speaks of will. Relate that with the earlier experience of force. Force is when awareness shifts, exercises itself on itself. What is will? Nothing but awareness shifting as force and then going out of itself. You will towards something which is not you. So knowledge is taking it out, will is taking it out, and the delight is also in this whole movement unfolding. So the knowledge, will, delight are special aspects or special workings of consciousness and force. And these he also describes, even in these, in their effectuation, in their movement, there has to be the sense of oneness. Now if you hold these 6 terms together, you've pretty much covered everything that can happen in the universe. Everything of the universe's birth, everything of the universe's unfoldment, everything of the universe evolving is basically these 6 things working inside the universe. And if in these 6 things the oneness is always held, well, in everything you hold the oneness. So the sentence is at a very deep and essential level. Now from here, he moves to more and more specific aspects of the experience of oneness. And so there is one long sentence. We have, as we have seen, to live in the consciousness of the absolute, transcendent, and of the absolute manifested in all relations. Impersonal and manifest as all personalities. Beyond all qualities and rich in infinite quality. A silence out of which the eternal word creates. A divine calm and peace, possessing itself in infinite joy and activity. So a series of images, series of aspects highlighting the 2 extremes. Now each of these dualities we have seen before in the paragraph before the previous one. But there we saw them from below as we are approaching the oneness. Now it is as if having attained to the oneness, we are exploring how oneness experiences itself in differences and in the play and in all the extremes of the play. And this is what this is describing. We have to live in the consciousness of all these things. The absolute transcendent and the absolute manifested in all relations. That means the one thing common is the absolute. But the absolute has 2 facets. It transcends and it enters in all relations, manifests in all relations. It's the same absolute. Sri Aurobindo explains how, elsewhere, when the divine chooses to express himself, of course you have infinity of possibilities. But when the divine asserts his freedom from all those infinity of possibilities, that is the movement of transcendence. Now, when the divine manifests in infinity of possibilities, we might say, therefore the divine is made up of the sum of all these possibilities. That would be the logical thing to say. If all possibilities that the divine could express were to be held somehow, well, we could say the sum total is the divine. But the reality is that's not it. The divine always exceeds the sum total. And this asserting of the freedom that you can put together everything and I'm still greater than that, I'm still free of that, I'm not bound to any of those, I'm not limited by any of those. That poise of the divine is the sense of transcendence. So when we look at the divine as the absolute when it turns away is this transcendent. The absolute when it embraces, then it is seen manifested in all relations. But always it is the same one absolute. And in this experience of the oneness, that's what you live in. With both the turns, the turning away and the turning to embrace, it is always the absolute in which you live. And then next, we have to live in the divine as impersonal and manifest as all personalities. And you can see how this derives from the first. The impersonal is when the divine stands back. meets all things equally. All the infinite possibilities of infinite universes across space, across time, infinitely. Everything that is born, everything that dies, everything that is in movement of transition of form, it meets all things equally. It is the same divine. This is one side, impersonal. And the other is, it is also the same divine who pours himself to become all these things. Each flower, each ant, each grain of sand, each atom is the divine pouring himself totally to become that. And if you play with scale from a grain of sand to a galaxy, to a super galaxy, it is still the same one divine pouring himself. And so we have to know this oneness and live in this consciousness, manifested in all personalities. We see the same divine oneness as the impersonal poise with which the divine embraces everything equally. You see this contrast. Each thing is uniquely the divine and therefore has a unique relation with the divine. And yet at the same time it is the same one divine that supports all things, apparently impersonally. In the nature of the experience, when you dwell on it this way, there is no contradiction. If the mind tries then to think about it, then it can create the sense of a division, the sense of a contradiction. As an analogy, when, let's say, there's a large family, it used to be, if you go back a few decades, they had families of 10 children. A mother will call the entire family, it's time for dinner. And when she calls the whole family together, she's meeting all of them as one lot, equally. And yet, as she serves food, with each she holds a unique relationship. For each she has made something different perhaps. And at the same time, she is meeting them as all her children equally. It doesn't feel contradictory, it's just different way of relating, if at all, but it's the most normal thing. But when you then turn it into mental terms, oh, the divine has to stand back from the whole universe and support equally. The divine has to make special relations. All of this sense of division comes when you separate the divine from the universe. But when you live in this sense of the oneness, which he has developed now, yes, of course, they are just different aspects of relating. They're not even different. It's one divine. And so it is in this sense of oneness that you hold these two facets. Then, he says, we have to live in the consciousness beyond all qualities and rich in infinite quality. Again the same idea. When the divine stands back, not bound to any limitation of quality, then it is the consciousness beyond all qualities. When the divine pours himself in all possibilities, then you have this rich, infinite quality pouring out, which becomes the whole universe. And yet none of them can ever capture the divine. All of them together can never contain or define that which always stands beyond and is always free. And we see no contradiction when in this sense of oneness. And then we have to know and live in the divine as a silence out of which the eternal word creates. The creative movement is similar to our speech. And so you will see in all of the ancient traditions, they use this act of speaking as a symbol or a representation of the creative movement of the divine. We have also used the word birth. The universe is born. And we may still use that as an event, it was born so many billion years ago. But the act of speech does not end with the birth. The speaking movement is a creative movement which is unendingly flowing out. The universe is not just born but continues to pour out unendingly as an unending birth. If you see a river flowing out from the mountain, unendingly pouring itself out, that would be a closer analogy. And you can see it is almost like a speech. In the pouring out, what are you expressing? Your thoughts. What are your thoughts expressing? What you are. And so what pours out is yourself just taking a movement, taking the form of a movement, dynamism. And the analogy with speech now becomes so much more. And as in speech, there are rhythms, there are stages, there are sentences, paragraphs, and so in the development of the universe you find similarly rhythms, stages and cycles. The human experience of speaking in fact captures something of that creative consciousness, which is the reason why the ancients made this association. When we speak, the act of formulating the words is an act in which you are giving birth to a thought. You are infusing the thought with an energy. And as you release it in your speech, it acquires an independent character of its own and goes on doing work. You may stop speaking, but the thing released continues to work. Very similar to the whole movement of the universe pouring out. It continues once it's poured out. It may over time fade away, but still it has an independent reality. It's an act of creation. But creation of what? Of yourself. You are putting something of yourself out into the speech. Now, depending on the power and concentration of the thought and the energy that is infused, and even on the form that is given to it, there are different results and outcomes. If you observe this character of the creative power of speech, you will notice often the form of the word is not so important. What is infused into it is often more important. I still remember this as one of the defining experiences I had going back maybe 20 years, a little less. This was a lady who was an extraordinary woman in the field of Indian literature. The name slips my mind right now. And we were seated as a group, small group, and she was narrating an experience. An experience she had when she went to the southern tip of India, and the last bit is a rock out in the ocean. Sitting there, and there's a temple on the rock, turning to face the whole landmass of India, surrounded by the ocean all around you. Sitting there, and she sat in the temple, and she was describing her experience, and as she was describing, her speech became more and more soft. The gap between the words increased, and the words themselves, instead of forming complete sentences, became almost phrases. And then at some point, she almost stopped speaking physically, but the thing she was speaking continued without physical speech. And at that moment, all of us were deeply moved. It's as if we experienced what she had experienced. She was able to transmit it in a certain way. And the interesting thing was, the less she spoke, the more impactful was the experience. When you have too many words, the words tend to scatter. They tend to form almost like a screen of activity. They reveal, but they conceal much more. And when the words become less, the silence comes forward and speaks directly, then you have the most powerful, the most intense communication. But in fact, the power of the word is the power in the silence. And that's why it comes most directly with least wording. Sri Aurobindo even points out that, first, in the mantric tradition, they speak of how you may recite, they teach how you may recite mantras. And one of the things they teach you is, there is a point where the speech becomes soft until it's barely heard. And just the lips seem to move with the minutest of articulation physically. And they say in the tradition of the mantra that that's when the mantra is most powerful. You can shout mantra with full force and it will be limited by the power of the force that you're pushing into it. Or you can remove all these artificial forms and let the mantra become pure, as if emerging out of silence and staying closest to the silence, and it has the greatest power there. And so we are seeing this here in this sentence, a silence out of which the eternal word creates. But the word, capital W. In the biblical tradition, in the Gospel of St. John, I think, it is, this is the theme of the first few lines. In the beginning was the Word. That's the beginning. Without the Word, there is only the silence. In the beginning was the Word. And the Word was with God. Even before it is released, it is already there in the silence. And the Word was God. And then, as if to contrast, and the darkness comprehended it not. And there's this sudden division that is appearing. And then the Word speaks and forms, and the universe flows. And so to know and live in the oneness of the divine consciousness as the silence, but it's not ending with the silence. It is silence out of which the eternal word creates. And it is the oneness in both that we live in. And we do not see it anymore as two different movements, because it is the same power of creation which is held in the silence, which moves in the word. But it is the same thing. And then we live also in a divine calm and peace, possessing itself in infinite joy and activity. The calm, the peace continues to be held even in the activity, even in the joy, and infinitely in the joy and in the activity. What is common in both? The oneness of the divine calm and peace as it moves into activity or it withdraws from activity, but it is still the same base of peace. It is still the same joy in the peace and in the activity. And so this, with a series of images, he has shown you how the oneness holds these extremes of experience in one continuum. And then he describes the poise of the divine in this oneness. Because after all, who is it that you are knowing? Satchidananda, one in himself and one in his manifestation. It is him. It is not just a thing, it is him, the Lord himself. And we have here in the next sentence a moving description of the Lord. If you wish to worship the divine, if you wish to express your adoration, if you wish through that adoration in devotion to merge into him in love, well, this is one of the most beautiful sentences which not only satisfies the mind but also the heart and gives you the sense of the divine oneness in everything. I read the whole sentence first. It's a bit longish. We have to find him knowing all, sanctioning all, governing all, containing, upholding, informing all. As the Purusha, and at the same time executing all knowledge, will and formation as Prakriti. So here, from the poise of oneness, which was flowing to become everything, we move to the next level. He's taking us literally through the steps of the whole manifestation. He takes us to the next level where there is this double position of consciousness. One which is supporting, one which is then expressing. And in both it is Him. But we have to know Him as the one who is both, but He is equally in both poises as He is in the totality. So, first is the poise of the Purusha. And within the poise of the Purusha are three facets of the relation to what he is supporting. So we have to find him knowing all, sanctioning all, governing all. And then, as these three poises enter the whole relationship of what he is informing, what he is knowing, sanctioning and governing, then it is containing, upholding, informing. So there's very interesting 6 words in a pair of 3 and 3. We'll explore this a little bit. And this describes the relationship of the Purusha towards all manifestation. This is the supporting consciousness. First, knowing all, then sanctioning all, then governing all. What's the difference between these? The one divine consciousness knows everything because everything is his awareness. Again, you take a human example. What do you know about yourself? Well, whatever you're aware of. Can you, for example, know where your hair presently is behind your head, or in which direction it is sticking out from your head? No, because I can't feel it. Can you know where your finger is right now? So your attention immediately goes in the awareness of the finger. Oh yes, right now my left hand is curled. Do you know your feet? Yes, immediately your attention goes. Where your attention can go, where your awareness exists, there you know. Can you know what is the state of your heartbeat? A little bit, but not wholly. Semi-conscious. I know my heartbeat is reasonably relaxed now. But when I am upset, when I am tense, I know it is tense, but I don't know how much. Do you know whether your stomach is digesting the food properly? A little bit. So what you experience is consciousness is knowledge. What you're aware of is what you know, because you are what you're aware of. Okay? So what is the nature of the divine in his experience, in his relation with the world? Because all is his awareness pouring out. He is in everything. He is everything. And therefore, all knowledge. So the word here, knowledge, is not the mental knowing all. It is the identity of knowing all. I am in everything, and therefore I know everything intimately from inside out. Often as children, because we have imaged the divine as, through comics or stories, sitting on the cloud looking down at you, or inside the idol in the temple, or whatever the image is, because there's a picture and a form, and we tend to give a human character to things, we may end up thinking, well, how will the divine know me? I have to call, I have to make a little bit of noise, isn't it? Or I have to give him something to make a transaction. These are all normal childish ideas which spread in humanity because of the sense of how will he know me? Because he is separate and I am separate, I am here. Even it goes quite deep. I have seen in people when they will say things like, but if you pray, he will listen to you more than he will listen to me. Why? Because, you live in Pondicherry, you're closer to the source, or you are more used to meditating, you are closer to him somehow, you are more pure than I am, whatever form it takes. And the basic idea is that there is a gap, and the divine is bound to the same limitation as we are of preference, of closeness or distance. But if we remove this error and consider that the whole universe and everything that exists is made out of His, not just substance, but consciousness. That means it is His awareness that forms this tissue that is the flower. His awareness that forms the tissue that is my body. His awareness is the substance that forms the energy and the thought within me. And then if I say, well, how will the divine know what I am thinking? Well, He is already the thought that I am thinking. He is already the energy of my life force. He is already the substance of my body, and He does not need to make an effort to know. He is already in identity in the knowledge of the whole universe. So it is in this sense that we have to know, we have to find Him knowing all. There's no need to meditate, there's no need to think out in order to reach out and know. It is in identity in the oneness of the universe. We have to find Him knowing all. And then the second degree, a shift in the relation. In the knowing all, He is intimately one with all things. In the second degree, it's as if He steps back a little bit and allows the things to move, to happen, but allowing them, that is, sanctioning all. Unless He accepts that this happens, it cannot happen, because after all it is His awareness, His energy that makes it happen, that is the happening. So somewhere there has to be a poise within Him that says, yes, this flower must bloom. Or somewhere there has to be a poise that accepts that the gardener comes and chops the bud before it can bloom. And somewhere within Him there has to be the sanction that the flower drops and is crushed as the gardener steps upon it. If there is not the sanction, it cannot happen, because all is expression of what He accepts to be. There is nothing else. But this sanctioning position is as if one step removed, as if now standing back and allowing or not allowing, choosing or rejecting. And then the third poise, governing all. And here we have the sense of He is the authority, the supreme authority whose will is executed, but the gap is now experienced. What He decides happens. When He decides that a galaxy should be born, it's born. When He decides this whole thing should be destroyed, there is a supernova. And in His consciousness, extending beyond, throughout space and throughout time, and beyond space and time, every galaxy that is born and every supernova that explodes is all held in the total knowledge of knowing all. Nothing happens without His knowing everything of all its consequences. When the supernova happens, all the ripples reaching out across the universe are known to Him before even He sanctions. And all the relationships changing, and all the stars destroyed, all the lives perhaps destroyed, or new stars born and new lives born, are all already known in His awareness, because knowing all. So you see, the three are actually three facets of each other. You cannot isolate one from the other. In order to govern all, He has to know all. He has to be sanctioning all. He cannot sanction unless He governs all and knows all, and so on. But these three poises are as if shades of relationship, for which, because of the huge difference that there exists in the relationship to our mind, we give three names. The first name of the relationship where He is knowing all, because He is one with all things, we call Brahman. He is all that exists. In the second relationship, it is sanctioning, as if he steps back and allows or not allows, but not involved directly. We call Purusha, supporting, uninvolved as if, static, unchanging, but accepting or rejecting without changing. And the third, where he is governing all, we call Ishvara, Lord. So these three terms describe three different relationships. But as you have seen, if you really dwell upon each one of them, they are just three different ways in which you relate. Now you could translate this into a personal experience on a human scale. You know, well, whatever limited way of your awareness of your body, but you can also choose to stand back. Watch your hands working, watch your hands as they do some mechanical activity. You're aware of the hands, you're aware of what they're doing because you're one with it, and yet you can allow your hands, let's say, to stitch mechanically. I don't know if you've ever seen, it's not so common nowadays, but some decades ago there were people who would be knitting and talking at the same time, and flawlessly doing the work. And every once in a while there might be an error, and they would know when the error happened, they would stop and undo, correct it, and then go on mechanically. Now you see what's happening. There is an awareness, but there's a separation in the awareness, watching. The separation in awareness is sufficiently aware that it detects when there's an error. But how? By the part which is already involved in the knowing. And yet it stands back and can intervene. Stop, you made a mistake, correct it. And then again it stands back. Interesting, isn't it? From that poise of standing back, it can hold an intention. Slow down, speed up, make a change, turn the direction, change the form. But it's not doing it itself. And at the same time, there is the mastery that steps in and says, this needs to be, a new skill needs to be developed. It can actually enter, train, withdraw, ruling the whole process, governing as if from a distance. But never really at a distance. It is intimately one, therefore it can govern completely and perfectly. So there are three facets of each other, so to say. It's only one Lord, one divine, taking these three poises in the play. And then the three words paralleling these three statuses are containing, upholding, and informing all as the Purusha. Containing, upholding, and informing. Now you'll see these three words are in the reverse sequence. When he is governing all, he contains everything. When he is sanctioning, at that point he is supporting, upholding. And when he is knowing everything, he is informing, in the form, filling from within. And you'll see it's very interesting play in the poetry. The rhythm goes like this. It starts from, we have to find him knowing all, sanctioning all, governing all, containing, upholding, informing all. So just to make the difference in the rhythm of the poetry, in the first one he's repeating all, and the second one he puts all these three together and puts only one all. We have to know him, knowing all, sanctioning all, governing all, containing, upholding, informing all as the Purusha. And so in the two things you will see the relationship, one as the Lord, and then in his Prakriti aspect also implied in this other thing, containing, upholding, informing, deeply intimate with the whole relationship, holding it with the whole universe, holding it, filling it, and from inside upholding. But still it is the Purusha. And at the same time, with all this knowledge, what is he doing? And at the same time, executing all knowledge will and formation as Prakriti. And suddenly we find Prakriti is not so different from Purusha. It's just another aspect of the same oneness. When he is already informing all, and from within he is supporting and governing and so on, well, is it really different? And yet we have to the mind we have to give it executing knowledge, will and formation. And so it's a different function. It is inside everything, it is doing everything, it is the changing process. So we call it a different thing, Prakriti. So in the first case, the Purusha, while he takes these three poises of knowing all, sanctioning all, governing all, he seems to be doing nothing. He knows, he sanctions, he governs, but who executes his order? Well, it is his energy. It is the knowledge being executed. It is the will which is going out to do. It is the movement which is creating a form, but not he. So we will call that Prakriti. But as we have seen earlier, the effectuation of the consciousness, the effectuation of the knowledge, the effectuation of the force and the will is only him moving to take a different poise. So Prakriti is not really different. In the oneness, we know him as Purusha, we know him as Prakriti, but it is in the oneness that we hold this double poise. And what is Prakriti doing? Executing all knowledge, executing all will, executing all the formations. So whatever he knows, let's say I'm aware of my hand, taking the human analogy, I'm aware of my hand. In my awareness, I'm aware that my hand can close into a fist. And now I execute that awareness that I can close into a fist. You see how it's not really different. It is awareness just executing itself. Now, for the first time as a child, when you jumped across a large gap, you had never done it before. You stand on the edge, you're about to jump, or you see other people jumping, you're afraid. Can I do it? Inside you there's a knowledge. I know I can do it. Once that knowledge comes forward, then you make the leap. In the leap, your muscles move in a certain way with a certain force which you have never before done in your life. What leads them? The knowledge which was already within you. I know I can do it. If you have that, then the rest flows and happens. But you will see a child hesitating, and inside he is not sure he can do it, and you know, he is going to trip. Because the knowledge has not emerged, it has not become true in itself, it is not yet complete, and he starts moving, and what will the muscles follow? Not something real, not knowledge, and so there is a loss, there is an error. In the very first poise, before you move, the act is already done and held in the knowledge. Only then you can move perfectly. This connection and this ability to consciously connect is the secret of perfect action. We see this in the training given to Olympic gymnasts. They stand, they look at, let's say somebody is going to do a series of movements on the double bar. She stands there, concentrates. In that moment, the whole movement she is going to perform is held in her completely. And you can feel it. And you know it will work out. If there's a moment of hesitation, a small gap, you can feel it. And you know the person will fail. It's very interesting if you observe it like this. And this is really what's happening in the divine consciousness also. What is Prakriti? This knowledge of what I can be moving to now become. So, at the same time executing all knowledge, will and formation. But it was always there. As Prakriti. So we know him as Purusha, we know him as Prakriti, and just as in Purusha there is this triple aspect of triple relation, so too in Prakriti there are three, so to say, drives or aspects of the movement which drive. And so he uses three words: executing all knowledge, will and formation. So in the first stage there is the knowledge, my hand as fist. In the second stage, that knowledge is being actualized, it's being pushed. And so there's the movement of the will starting the process of closing the fist. And then there is the third stage in the very change of the form, where the fist form becomes different from the open palm. Okay? So knowledge, I know my fist. The will, I begin to act out what I know. And then the formation, which is different. Again, if you live in the consciousness of the underlying unity, they are just three facets of each other. Already in the knowledge was the will and the formation existent. They have just been, we have just shifted from this to that, but it was always there. You see how all of this is so different when you see from within the oneness. The same things if you had approached from the other side, from the divided consciousness, from which we normally observe, we'll say, there are these three different things. No, they are not different. There is only one thing which is shifting between three poises of itself. And it is this which you begin to live in this consciousness of the oneness. All knowledge, all will, all formation, and this is the working of Prakriti. Now here you have a very deep secret which is revealed when you think of this deeply. These sentences are so deeply pregnant. They hold enormous chunks of knowledge in this very simple formulation. You will see here 3 and 3 in the Purusha and in the Prakriti, and they match. There is a correspondence. And there's this becoming that, or that which was always this. And here you get a glimpse of a deep truth of form of nature. Sri Aurobindo points out that quality of consciousness is the character of Purusha. Form, number, geometry, design are the aspect of Prakriti. It is the quality of consciousness which was always there, which is being revealed through this particular rhythm of Prakriti's knowledge, will and formation. When Prakriti moves into rhythms of this kind, she uses that occasion to express the consciousness of Purusha, the qualities of that consciousness. And this is the reason why certain forms, certain rhythms express certain qualities. Now nature can take a different form and express the same quality. Or in a variation of the same form, she can express a different quality. This is the secret behind what science observes. Science doesn't explain, it observes. It says, when there is a single electron and a single proton in a relationship, we have hydrogen. What is hydrogen? A bundle of qualities of gas and reactivity and relation. That's all it is. If you have 2 electrons and 2 protons in a certain relationship, we have helium. What is that? A different bundle of qualities. Totally different. Nothing of helium is common to hydrogen. It's not that you take twice the quality of hydrogen and you get helium. No. Although structurally it is double of this, quality-wise it's totally different. Now keep adding 3, 4, 5 of each, and you get all of the elements. Somewhere in the middle you get a metal, you get gold, you get something shiny, you get something dull, something light, something heavy, something gaseous, something solid, something liquid. Why? What's the logic? It's not obvious. You could not predict from the pattern of 2 electrons and 2 neutrons, 2 protons, that you would get this quality. You cannot predict. But having observed that 2 gives this and 3 gives this, you can see a pattern. 4 will tend to give that. Perhaps. We don't know. And some of it is true, but not always. The truth of it is, for nature, it's just what she chooses. She makes this rhythm and aligns it to this quality and throws out this quality through this rhythm. That's it. She does not need logic there. She just does it on a whim, on a fancy of her play of delight. Science observes, categorizes, sequences and puts in a structure and says, this is nature's structure and system and secret. But the true secret behind is that she is utterly free to do what she likes. And that is the reason why every now and then when science says, now this is definitely it, we find there is an anomaly. Under certain circumstances, the thing doesn't behave as it should. And the anomaly tells you, or it's nature telling you, okay, I like to do it that way, but once in a while I feel like doing it differently. In your textbooks, you would have seen this very interesting chart of all the elements put against their properties and their particular configuration. And most of them tend to form a broad line, but it's not a straight fixed line. They're scattered around the line. Okay? Some more, some less, scattering around, almost like a random pattern. And then out of that, water shoots straight out in a completely misaligned, out of alignment position. And because of that particular quality bundle water holds, life is possible. It's a very strange thing. Water holds a unique bundle of properties which is not in the normal pattern of elements and their combinations. But because of that particular pattern, life is somehow possible. If it was not, if water was part of this normal band, you would not have had life as we know it, or no life would be possible. One of the practical forms in which it takes place is one of the very few things which expands when it freezes. You see, normally when things become cold, they shrink. And at the coldest, they are most shrunk. Water shrinks as it becomes cold. At 4 degrees, it is maximally shrunk. And as you continue to cool down, it expands again. And when it's ice, it is somehow larger than its minimum. And the result is, in a pond, when it freezes, the ice floats. And the water below is not frozen. Anything that freezes immediately drifts upwards. And the frozen water, interestingly, is an excellent insulator. It protects from cold. And so the cold which was freezing the water is now locked out, and the water below remains liquid, even semi-warm. You see, in the Eskimo house, they make the house out of ice. And the ice protects from the cold outside. Interesting. So the character of water, if you go deep into its properties, is a strange bundle of things, all of which are as if designed to make life possible and protect life against all the vagaries of extremes. And strangely enough, its freezing point and boiling point again are such, the moment water heats up enough, it begins to boil off and it takes away the heat, keeping temperatures within range, protecting life again. So if you have too much heat coming from the sun, there's a whole process of water modulating itself in the atmosphere to keep the earth's temperatures within a narrow band stable, within the oceans stable, protecting life always. And so for scientists, it's almost as if there was no water, there's no life. And so if you can find a planet which doesn't have water, most likely it doesn't have life. Well, it might not have life conveniently the way we think, but nature proves you wrong every time. And she again throws in one of those variations. You have bacteria which grow at the bottom of the ocean, where a volcano erupts from the ground. You have molten lava coming out with this huge pressure of the ocean above, 1 kilometer or 2, pressing on the water so strong that if you took the human flesh, the hand would be crushed and flattened completely by the pressure of the water. And there you have bacteria which thrive in boiling water. They live not by oxygen, not by sunlight, They live by the poisonous gases which are being thrown out from the lava, and they thrive there. If you take them out and bring them up, they die of cold. So nature shows you, well, I can create life anywhere. Give me any heat, any pressure, any combination of things. She'll find a way to arrange molecules, and it's not the arrangement. She will infuse into it the bundle of qualities of life, of Purusha consciousness, and awaken through that molecular bundle the qualities needed to have sustaining life. So this relationship of Purusha and Prakriti is quite fascinating. Sri Aurobindo describes in the Savitri through several pages how Prakriti looks at Purusha and tries to create what he dreams. Meaning in Purusha there is the possibility to be this, to be that. And the movement of life energy looks at that, takes those ideas as her templates and tries to create those forms for his delight, to entertain him, to fulfill him, and to catch him who is beyond form, beyond limitation, and bind him somehow in her through form, through these creations. So she's as if trying to grasp and take and give form to that which is always exceeding. And that's how life generates infinite possibilities and continues to grow and evolve and so on. So there's a whole play taking place there. But what does she do? She's not bound even to her own rules. She sets the rules and plays by them, and every now and then breaks them, because finally she is a reflector of his freedom and his infinite possibilities. So when we look at them in the consciousness of oneness, well, it's the same thing, taking two poises, and there's something intimately deep within them, and all of creation is only a play of their free choice, expressing the marvel and the miracle of this infinite possibility. Nothing is bound, nothing is compelled, everything is her free creation. Through these three: knowledge, executed, will, and formation. So I just reread this sentence. We have to find him knowing all, sanctioning all, governing all, containing, upholding, and informing all as the Purusha. And at the same time, executing all knowledge, will, and formation as Prakriti, but the same one. Then he describes now what happens when Purusha and Prakriti play, and through the attempt to manifest the infinite possibilities of the divine, they organize in their play all the possibilities around certain essential principles which are already there in Satchidananda. But as they organize it, those principles become more distinctly formed, creating what for us appears in form as 7 planes of consciousness. Remember, in the consciousness of oneness, everything is the same divine taking so many poises, all at the same time in the same oneness. But in the play between them, the aspects of the divine, the qualities which are similar, they engage with each other much more. The qualities which are not so similar, they engage with each other less, and therefore feel as if they are far. Things which engage more are felt as if close. And so the result is as if a natural sifting, like a sieve. All the same sized things fall through. The larger similar sized things stay separate. So there is as if a sieve, except in the reverse direction. The more dense, the more crude things tend to settle below. The more refined and finer things tend to be floating at the top. And there is separation of distinct 7 qualities, 7 principles of consciousness. These now he describes in a sentence which is actually made up of 7 sentences separated by semicolons. The first is the principle of existence, then consciousness, then delight, then the supermind, then mind, life, and matter, making for the 7 planes. But remember, in Satchidananda, they are all one in each other. There's nothing really separate. Sat is Chit is Ananda. Existence that is conscious and blissfully conscious. But as they begin to play out, existence is tasted by Satchidananda. Existence is enjoyed as a thing in itself. Consciousness is enjoyed as a thing in itself. Delight is enjoyed as a thing in itself, creating the sense of three separate domains of creation, where one is dominant, the other two are supportive, and separately they play out their possibilities. But in all this, the sense of oneness is strong. What happens if we veil the sense of oneness and allow existence, consciousness and bliss to be played out in separation, in division, and you have as if the reflection of these three in the lower three planes, mind, life and matter, in which division dominates, oneness is hidden. In the upper three, oneness dominates, division is just a play of oneness. In the lower three, division dominates. Oneness is what you attempt to do by joining and forcing pieces together, never really realizing it. But you can join and force because secretly behind there is the oneness. But it's so well hidden, you cannot realize it. But because it is there, you dream of it and you struggle to realize it. And in between is the principle which knows the oneness, which knows the multiplicity, and which has the power to translate from here to there, to bring into creation all possibilities. So each of these is described separately as a sentence. Let's read first all of them, just to get the sense of what he's laying out before us, and then we will go into each one of them separately. We have to see Him, and this is the Lord who we adore. We have to see Him as one existence, being gathered in itself and being displayed in all existences. Next, we have to see Him as one consciousness, concentrated in the unity of its existence, extended in universal nature, and many-centered in innumerable beings. So the oneness and the multiplicity. Then we have to see Him as one force, static in its repose of self-gathered consciousness and dynamic in its activity of extended consciousness. Then one delight, blissfully aware of its featureless infinity and blissfully aware of all feature and force and forms as itself. Then we have to know Him as one creative knowledge and will, one creative knowledge and governing will, supra-mental, originative and determinative of all minds, lives and bodies. And then we have to know Him as one mind containing all mental beings and constituting all their mental activities. Then we have to know Him as one life active in all living beings and generative of their vital activities. And finally, we have to know Him as one substance constituting all forms and objects as the visible and sensible mold in which mind, life manifest and act. And then in this sentence, he completes with something more which links it back all the way to the top. Okay? So you have one substance in which all mind and life are acting. And then he says, just as one pure existent is that ether in which all conscious force and delight exist unified and find themselves variously. For these are the 7 principles of the manifest being of Satchidananda. So, very interestingly, first there is the existence, sheer existence, in which you have the consciousness and the force playing about in their delight. Then you have the consciousness in all its double poises, you have the force and the bliss. Then the supermind, which is determinative of everything, it holds and compels according to its design and structure. And then you have the mind, which is the very substance and the activity of thought, and the life, which is the same one everywhere. And then the matter in which mind and life find form to express themselves. And then he connects it back to the Sat. In the same way as in the one Sat, you had the consciousness and the force playing about. And you see what he is doing. Having gone to the bottom, he's showing you that this bottom is secretly the top. The same Sat now organizing itself differently. But it's the same relation it has with the other two. The material consciousness, matter itself, has the same relation with mind and life as the Sat has the relation with consciousness and force. They play in it. Here also in matter, mind and life play in it by finding a base of form. And having described these 7 principles, the suggestion in this very last sentence is, here all these can play in the same way as they play up there. And so in matter is that working secretly, hidden perhaps, but increasingly revealing itself. And when it reveals itself fully, it will be the Satchidananda working out its play here in the domain of form. And this is the direction of the evolution. This is the fulfillment of the whole manifestation and the journey of the universe. And all this is held in this very simple, basic outline of the 7 principles of the manifest being of Satchidananda. Satchidananda may hold himself beyond manifestation or pour himself into manifestation, but it is the same one being that we have to see through all the planes. It is the Satchidananda, the one divine, the Lord. Now each of these we can take up separately, because within them there are interesting nuances, but everywhere the theme which he is pointing to is that they can take a double status, holding back as a supportive Purusha or pouring out as the manifesting force of Prakriti. On every plane is this double turn of the play, all the way down into matter. And on this basis you will find the next few chapters are developed. The very next chapter is called The Soul and Nature. On all planes the soul can take its poise and work itself out through the movement of nature, and he'll describe those. And then what is the relationship, the soul and its liberation, becomes the theme of the chapter thereafter. And subsequently the planes of our existence, where he maps out how we live on all these planes and can act on all these planes. And then going into specifics in the next chapter, the lower triple Purusha, and then the next chapter, the ladder of self-transcendences. Now all of this you will find held in sum in this description of the planes of consciousness. But on the basis of unity, we have to see the one divine in all this. And when we do this, all the rest of the chapters are built on this foundation. Sri Aurobindo has a very different approach to the relationship with life, because it is based on this underlying unity. There are, as you know, classically 3 broad poises of the philosophies. The first one, which is a monism, which says everything is one ultimately, essentially. But in that, at least in the way it is taught, the whole universe therefore merges back into oneness and has no separate purpose other than to lapse back into oneness. In the second broad framework of philosophy, there is the origin, the divine, and then there is the creation or the manifestation, the universe, and the two are ever separate. The universe can never utterly know the divine can never utterly express itself in the universe. You can only have relations and more complete relations, but never know oneness. After all, you are finite, that is infinite. And so the two will always remain apart with always some gap, which also can be justified. And then there is the third approach, which is the qualified monism, Vishishta Advaita, which says that all of these are like waves and ripples of that, and ultimately it is that which exists. But even there, the way it is understood is the waves and ripples ultimately have to lapse back. What's the point of a wave if it keeps waving? Well, eventually it has to stop and become still, at which point the whole universe merges back into oneness in the silence. Sri Aurobindo points out that his approach is different from all these three, but includes each of these three as aspects of itself, as specialized experiences. In his approach, everything is an expression of the same oneness. Every form that is put out, yes, like a wave, but the wave is the ocean. Each form is the divine taking up a special focus, a special form for the purpose of the multiple play. And the purpose, therefore, is not lapsing back like the wave, but fulfilling the play of delight in and through forms. In the consciousness of the Satchidananda, the play of the delight is there in the multiplicity of the Satchidananda, in which unity is never lost. Everything is revealed. Nothing is hidden. But here in the lower triple world, where division is the dominant theme, everything is concealed, the oneness is hidden, and out of that concealment more and more reveals itself. To what end? Eventually to have the experience of many separate centers of the divine, but in each of them the divine fully revealed, or to whatever extent he chooses to reveal freely for the purpose of the play. And we may use the analogy of a giant play of hide and seek, where the divine first hides to the point that he forgets that he is divine, and then he remembers bit by bit in small steps until he has to find himself, of course in him, but also in others, and then in the whole universe, and the whole process and the delight of self-discovery, but eventually in a revealed form, playing out as a conscious embodied divinity, as a creator, in a collective manifestation of divinity, where within each one of us is the same potential of the creation of the divine in the Satchidananda, now playing out through finite forms, an infinite consciousness, an infinite delight and possibility of play. What that is like, we cannot understand, we cannot even imagine, because the nature of the experience is belonging to a consciousness which is infinite. It's like a monkey trying to think rationally or trying to imagine what rational thinking would be like. Well, it cannot, because it is unable to become self-aware and stand back from its own thought, and cannot therefore assess and arrange thoughts. In the same way, to our consciousness, which is used to thinking in finite pieces, we cannot imagine what it's like to be infinite and to have infinite thoughts. Each thought is infinite in its scope, and then to arrange and play with them, and to experience each form and each object from a consciousness which is infinite without limitation. This is a very beautiful line which came on my SMS this morning from a friend who keeps sending something every morning, and it's so appropriate. It is from a European poet, William Blake. And you see here the true nature of poetry. I don't know the poem, it's just a separate sentence that appears. He writes, "If the doors of perception were cleansed everything would appear to man as it is infinite. I'll repeat it. If the doors of perception were cleansed, everything would appear to man as it is infinite. Meaning, the reality of everything is its infinity. And we may add its oneness. It is our perception and doors of perception, starting with our physical senses and ending at the peak which is in our mind. It is our perceptions and the doors which are clouded, muddied, fragmented, impure, whatever word you want to use, defective, ignorant. And if they're cleansed, then we will see things for what they are. And what they are is infinite, one delight. And this is the revealed experience of divinity, when we see the infinity of all things in and through their finite appearances of physical form, and the play that is possible and the nature of the delight that belongs to that nature, that consciousness. We cannot imagine, and yet we can feel deep inside us, in an intuitive part of our consciousness, in perhaps the deepest resonances of the soul's reflection in our thoughts and emotions. We feel this is possible, we feel this is close, we even feel that this must be. And if it is not, that is an error, it is a falsehood. The appearance of things appears false because somewhere within us we know what is the truth. But we are unable to know here because that knowing belongs already to a deeper part which can feel and know infinity. And it is there in us. It's not yet awakened on the surface, but inside it is there. And if it was not, we would not find any meaning in life. We feel meaning in life because it is that which brings meaning. And as we awaken more and more to its presence, the sense of the meaning grows. As its presence recedes, or rather as the clouding comes in between, we lose sense of meaning in life. And that's why the solution that the mother offers for all problems, you have boredom, you have depression, you have unhappiness, you have dissatisfaction, you have the sense of life being empty, meaningless, purposeless. All of us have been through phases of this kind. The solution for all of these is become conscious of the divine presence. It is that which brings meaning to life. It is that which brings the joy. It is that which brings the sense of purpose, the enthusiasm, and everything that you're missing is there in it. And to the extent that it even reflects in our surface parts, all these things fill our life. Without that, we would simply be automatons, machines, mechanical robots. It is the influence of the divine presence in us, reflecting in our thoughts, which gives us hope, which gives us ideals, which makes us want to know, to grow, to learn, to overcome limitations. It is its reflection in our heart which makes us feel, which makes us want to reach out, to connect, to experience relations, to experience oneness, to work together, to find fulfillment through the heart's emotions. And it is its expression in the physical consciousness that makes the world beautiful and real. And in spite of all the experience of pain and suffering, worth it. And so when this influence grows, when it comes forward, that is what we will call divinization. When it becomes revealed, the divinization is becoming more and more overt. And that's the whole direction of evolution, this revelation, this growth towards the oneness. And in this consciousness of the oneness where we know and live in the Satchidananda and know all to be the one divine being, it is revealed fully, overt, expressed, nothing hidden. And that's why he said, this realization of oneness and this practice of oneness indifference is the whole of the yoga. There is nothing else after all. So this is how we complete this paragraph in sum, but we will come back to it, to these last 7-8 sentences next time, and to explore the nuances which are suggested in each one of them, which will also give us a glimpse of the character of each of these planes of the cosmos, as well as the principle that the plane represents, which is present across all the planes. Remember, he refers to these as the 7 principles of the manifest being of Satchidananda. So as principles, they are present everywhere. And as planes, they represent that principles formulated in a specialized way. So the study of each of these sentences will give us some very deep insights, as well as an appreciation of the Lord in His poise on each of these planes and as each one of these principles. So you can see why this paragraph is so important, so special. We'll pause here and we can take up any comments or questions. We can stay in dwelling on the oneness and the beauty of what He has given to us, and meditate on it for the rest of the evening. Oh.